How many times have you been left screaming at your TV or a cinema screen at the utterly baffling decisions made by certain horror characters? Likely too many to count, we're sure. It may not be as prevalent these days, largely thanks to something like Scream poking fun at such idiocy, but for the longest time, horror movies were overflowing with total fools. Thankfully, not everyone in one of these pictures is a total tool, and it's on those smarter folks that the spotlight shines today. So with that in mind, I'm Ellie with What Culture, here with the 10 smartest decisions in recent horror movies. Number 10. The faked suicide in Halloween Ends. Halloween Ends was nothing if not opinion-splitting when it sliced its way to the silver screen last year. But one of the things most viewers could agree on was that Laurie Strode was positioned as extremely smart. Granted, the biggest gripe about Halloween Ends is that it features such minimal Laurie versus Michael Myers action, with Rowan Campbell's Corey Cunningham taking centre stage on the villain front, but the way in which Strode tricks Corey was fantastically done. To be fair, this whole situation tricked a fair few moviegoers upon a first watch, with Jamie Lee Curtis's iconic character seemingly at such a low point that she was about to take her own life. And Laurie even called 911 to report her impending suicide before putting a gun to her head. So when we hear a gunshot and see a splatter of something, it's easy to see why the lurking Corey would presume Laurie had shot herself. Only she hadn't, and instead it was Cunningham who was soon shot by the wily veteran. Number 9. Using the orange TUTSIA in Prey. After several bland to bad offerings in the franchise, 2022's Prey was a great return to form for an IP which first impressed audiences back in 1987 with the Arnold Schwarzenegger-fronted Predator. Far from the big beefy boys with big beefy guns approach of that original movie though, Prey is an incredibly stripped back affair that drops the titular Yatua species into 1700's Great Northern Plains. With Comanche warrior Naru at the core of this tale, she is one of several who have run-ins with the film's sole alien hunter. Unlike the vast majority of the other characters in Prey mind, Naru not only survives this encounter, but she actually manages to kill and behead the beast. To do that, she realises that the Yatua relies on body heat to detect movement and kill its target. This is where the orange TUTSIA, an orange flower, comes in handy, as ingesting this plant or rubbing it on your body naturally lowers a person's temperature. Upon utilising this herb, Naru effectively levels the playing field for Prey's final battle, and if anything, her knowledge of her surroundings gives her an advantage over her opponent. As such, this badass is able to get the better of the intergalactic brute and eventually fatally turn its own weapon against the creature. Number 8. Making the most of your tools in The Reef Stalked. To some, The Reef is the very best shark movie not named Jaws. So, when a sequel, The Reef Stalked, swam its way to screens last summer, there was some hope that this second Reef picture would capture some of the nerve-shredding dread and tension of its predecessor. Unfortunately, Stalked proved to be somewhat of a disappointment in that regard. Completely unrelated to The Reef, this sequel centres on sisters Nick and Annie, and their friends Jodie and Lisa, as they find themselves out in the water and, stalked by a great white shark. You see, this group had met up to mark the death of Nick and Annie's sibling Kath, who was killed by her abusive husband 9 months ago. By the Reef Stalked's finale, Lisa has fallen victim to this shark, and our remaining trio are stranded in a small knackered boat that's taking on water. It's here that Nick comes up with an extremely simple but extremely effective plan. Realising that the only items on the boat with them are a mesh net and a machete, Nick lures in the apex predator, throws the net over it, and then eventually stabs the beast to death. Number 7. Grabbing the hand sanitizer in Scream. Keeping your hands clean is always a good habit to keep on top of, and having some hand sanitizer to hand in 2022's Scream proved to be the perfect way to take down one of that picture's deranged ghost faces. While Richie is off battling his supposed girlfriend Tara, Sid and Gail are tasked with fighting Mikey in the kitchen of the house previously owned by Stu Marker's family. With Mikey having the upper hand as she takes on these two wounded veterans of this beloved series, Prescott grabs a nearby glass jar of hand sanitizer and smashes it over the lunatic's head. After the stovetop is then conveniently turned on, Gail shoots Mikey in the face, which causes her to stumble towards the stove's flame. Due to the alcohol prevalent in the hand sanitizer, this immediately causes Mikey to be set on fire in an extremely gnarly way. Number 6. Going along with your attackers in the Utah Cabin Murders. The Utah Cabin Murders is not a good movie. That said, it does feature a life-saving decision towards the close. Based on a very real 1990 home invasion by Von Taylor and Edward Deli, this picture sees these two convicts torment a family at their remote cabin retreat. While the names of the killers are the same as the real-life counterparts, the family name has been changed to Anderson for the film. The Utah cabin murders sees the grandmother and mother of the Anderson family executed by these nefarious masked figures. For the father, Richard, he's shot and presumed dead, which leads to Taylor and Deli turning their attention to sisters Lanier and Tina. Unfortunately, this attention means that Taylor in particular wants to take the girls upstairs to have sex with them. Shockingly, the older of the sisters agrees to this, and the siblings and their attackers head up to one of the bedrooms. Where this ultimately proves to be a wise move is that Lanier had noticed that her dad wasn't quite as dead as was believed. Getting these creeps out of that room allowed for the family patriarch to call the police, who arrived in time to arrest the two men. In the real world, Von Taylor was handed the death penalty, which has continuously been challenged to this day for his actions, whereas Edward Deli received a life sentence. Number 5. Refusing the Cenobites' gift in HELLRAISER. Throughout the vast HELLRAISER franchise, there are so many characters who have fallen afoul of the series' Cenobites and been swayed by their charms and promises. One such person who you cannot say that about, though, is Riley McKendry of the most recent HELLRAISER outing. A recovering drug addict, Riley's life is thrown upside down when she stumbles across the Lament configuration puzzle box. After initially solving this puzzle, chaos, carnage, and twisted imagery ensues for the character. And on that front, the biggest shock to Riley is the death of her brother Matt as part of the Cenobites' lust for pain, pleasure, and general sacrifice. By HELLRAISER's closing moments, Riley has played a part in helping the Cenobites fill their required sacrifices, and thus she is offered a gift by their sinister swords. That gift? Why, it's for Matt to be resurrected. Despite the obvious emotional pull that's there to bring her brother back to life, Riley ultimately decides against doing so. While she now has to deal with the grief and loss of her sibling, this character is one who is wise enough to realise that accepting a gift from the Cenobites will eventually come back to bite her on the backside down the line. Number 4. Stanley's sacrifice in It Chapter 2. While his Losers Club friends would have clearly loved to have Stanley with them for their later life battle with Pennywise in It Chapter 2, the narrative of this Stephen King adaptation is that the losers were only able to truly stop the dancing clown once and for all because of Stanley's passing. It's extremely hard to justify someone taking their own life as being a smart decision. But the closing moments of Chapter 2 frame it as though the losers wouldn't have had the full motivation to topple Pennywise were it not for Stan's death being a tool to fully bring them together for this battle. Once Bill Skarsgård's heinous Harlequin had been dispatched of at the end of this second picture, there's a slight jump forward in time where we see Mike receive a letter from the deceased Stanley. A letter which details how Stanley was too scared to fight it and that him sacrificing his life was essentially for the greater good. Stanley's intentions certainly worked, but it obviously remains to be seen whether Stan really needed to be so extreme in his actions in order to motivate his old school pals. Number 3. The fireworks in A Quiet Place. 2018's A Quiet Place is a tense picture, and few scenes are quite as tense as the moment when Emily Blunt's Evelyn Abbott goes into labour. Seeing how giving birth is one of the most painful things a human body can go through, combined with the fact that A Quiet Place features a world in which murderous blind aliens kill anyone who makes even the tiniest of sounds, you can understand why the Abbotts have quite the pickle here. Should Evelyn make a sound during childbirth, that will result in the death of herself and her impending new arrival. In a rather genius piece of thinking, the Abbott family had planned ahead here, with them having some fireworks hidden at a decent enough distance from their farmhouse. The clan's eldest son, Marcus, swiftly sprints out to the spot of these fireworks and sets them off as the labour begins, causing the alien creatures to be distracted by this spectacle, and also allowing Evelyn to let out some screams of pain as she gives birth in the bathtub to the family's latest addition. Number 2. Agreeing to try again in The Invisible Man. Writer-director Leigh Whannell dived into reimagining H.G. Wells' 1987 tale for a new Invisible Man movie, which explored domestic abuse, gaslighting, and provided numerous terrifying sequences. Here, a phenomenal Elizabeth Moss plays Cecilia Cass, a woman stuck in an abusive relationship with wealthy engineering genius Adrian Griffin. After Adrian commits suicide and leaves C $5 million, she starts to experience strange occurrences from an unseen presence that is the totally not dead Adrian in an invisible suit. Skipping ahead past Adrian framing Cecilia for several murders, her being committed to a psychiatric ward, and then Adrian being found held captive after his brother Tom was shot dead for being the Invisible Man, C put a masterful plan in place. Pregnant with Adrian's child, Cecilia is well aware that Tom was likewise set up by his own sibling, and so she agrees to give her relationship with Adrian one more try, solely so that she can wear a police wire and get a confession out of him. When Moss's character heads to the bathroom, Adrian slits his own throat, which is recorded on the house's CCTV, not to mention the police wire picks up Cecilia's screams and subsequent 911 call once she returns to the room. In actuality, C has donned an invisible suit as part of her bathroom break, and she then forced her tormentor to draw a steak knife across his throat. Number 1. Drinking the milk in Barbarian. When people talk about how horror is absolutely thriving right now, last year's Barbarian is a prime example of why it's such a great time to be a horror hound these days. While it's one thing to deliver a spine-chilling trailer, it's something else entirely to follow through on that promise and deliver a spine-chilling final product. Thankfully, Barbarian did just that. Plot-wise, this Zach Cregger-helmed offering initially centres on Tess and Keith, two strangers who have been double-booked in the same Airbnb house. Given how Tess is the audience's in for the picture, there's a suspicion that maybe Keith isn't quite as pleasant as we're led to believe, even more so when Tess discovers a hidden room with a blood-stained mattress and a camcorder in it. The tease is that Keith is responsible for what's in this hidden room, and subsequently he's well aware of the underground tunnels that this leads to. Of course he's not, and the poor fella is brutally beaten to death by the deformed figure of Mother. By the time Tess and the house's owner AJ wind up in the clutches of Mother later in the film, Tess has to disgustingly drink Mother's milk. By doing this, she unknowingly formed a bond with the creature, a bond that saw Mother save Tess in Barbarian's climax after AJ had pushed Tess to her likely death in order to save his own skin. And that concludes our list. If you think we missed any examples, then do let us know in the comments below, and while you're there, don't forget to like and subscribe and tap that notification bell. Also head over to Twitter and follow us there, and I can be found across various social medias just by searching Ellie Littlechild. I've been Ellie with What Culture. I hope you have a magical day, and I'll see you real soon.